I'm here at Mythic Championship VI with Tommy Ashton. Now, Tommy, you've been working away in the kitchen, my friend. You got a real spicy one for us here. It's not human food, however. You're playing Sultai cat food, Sultai Sacrifice.
Yep, shoving them right in the oven.
That's it. Well, look, I mean, for feline lovers around the world, maybe this isn't the deck for you, but I tell you what, we're going to get underway here and start off with a suite of cards that I think are pretty well represented this weekend.
The ubiquitous base.
We've seen, I mean, you don't have to tell us too much about these cards, but maybe talk to us about their specific role in this deck, because this is a little bit different, as we'll discuss.
Absolutely. Gilded Goose does a lot more here than usual, other than just the turn 2 Oko, in that the being able to sacrifice a food at will is actually very terrific. Addition, adding fuel for cats. And I believe I am leaning on Once Upon a Time as hard as any deck, not just to be able to get Cauldron Familiars, but also because I have chosen not to play any Fabled Passages, and I am kind of cheating on mana and hope it does not explode on me.
This is the spit and string that's holding it all together. Yes. All right. Now, I noticed only 2 Wicked Wolf, which is going to make sense as we get to the meat of this deck, but you mentioned to me before that Oko in this deck, more than anything else, is just basically an emblem that creates food. Like you were saying you had like 19 loyalty Okos because you're only activating the +2.
Yes, the making opposing things elk is going to come up a lot, but the making a food and always being able to have 1 or 2 or more food on the table ready to sacrifice is something that is much more important in this deck than the Sultai Ramp deck.
All right, well, we've seen a lot of food this weekend, of course. We've all been very, very hungry boys and girls, but you're doing something a little bit different with this food. We can move on to the next slide and have a look at the engine of this deck, which is very exciting. Now, Tommy, a lot of people will have seen the interaction between Cauldron Familiar and Witch's Oven. A couple of other people are playing this, but you are playing a draft build-around archetype all-star, a solid 4th pick, Trail of Crumbs. Talk to us about this card.
Well, it raised my eyebrows because it's similar to mechanics such as energy in that frequently any of the competitively costed cards that say the specific word on it, food, are something that should be explored, particularly ones that say whenever, because that is something that may be decent in draft when you activate it once a turn, but is particularly great and constructed if you're using it 4 or 5 or 6 times a turn. In particular, it's something that if you're doing it that often, or if you have multiples of it, you will be able to speed through your deck, and they actually accumulate more copies of it as you keep going. It finds more ovens, cats, correct, and more Trail of Crumbs. So you will frequently, once you get to 2, you can go through your deck very rapidly.
Now, one of the things I want to talk about here, we talk about, constraints on these mechanics. We talk about the bottleneck. And here, obviously, Witch's Oven, you can only activate once per turn. It taps. But you talked about sacrificing food to Gilded Goose. You talk about activating Witch's Oven. This all costs 0 mana.
Correct. Sometimes Wicked Wolf acts as an Arcbound Ravager in this deck.
There's no mana, you're dumping all of your mana into Trail of Crumbs. You must have a huge velocity here. This is an enormously value-oriented deck.
Gilded Goose being able to sacrifice and use that mana on the Trail of Crumbs trigger is something that happens as early as turn 2 and pretty much from then on each turn of the game.
So it's a different take on the synergy-driven aspect of these food decks. Very interesting indeed to see the way that this has come together. You've got a bit of a support cast as well. I want to talk about that, backing up the Trail of Crumbs, backing up this engine between Cauldron Familiar and Witch's Oven. Of course, we've got to have some good, honest-to-goodness removal and interaction here. Noxious Grasp.
I don't call that honest to be playing that, but yes.
It is definitely a concession to the format. We've seen Murderous Rider, we've seen Vraska Golgari Queen. I want you to talk to us about Massacre Girl and her role in this list, because when we were chatting about this before doing the deck tech, you were talking about her enormous utility.
Correct. It seems like there aren't very good, so removal spells can be interacted with by Veil or negated. Massacre Girl is something that can't be stopped by Veil, can't be stopped really by Grasp or Gust or anything like that. But it's in this deck a guaranteed wrath of the board, frequently taking down multiple lands that have been animated by Nissa,
which is huge.
In particular because you are guaranteed with Cat to almost always have a 1/1 on the board to start the chain. You don't need Paradise Druids. In fact, this deck doesn't have any. And additionally, once you have started the Massacre Girl chain, you can use Oven to bridge the gap. If you have a cat and they have several 3/3s, but there's no 2, you can be able to even sacrifice the Massacre Girl after the trigger has begun to get that effect of wrathing everything.
Which is just ridiculous. Like, we don't see interactions like usually it's Massacre Girl and you just kind of hope that the numbers all line up, but you can kind of fudge those numbers a little bit with cards like Witch's Oven, whatever else. Murderous Rider also plays an important role with its bottom of the library clause. You mentioned its interaction with Trail of Crumbs.
It uses the text on that in a way that text is invisible in almost every other, or a hindrance.
Yes.
In this case, the break in case of emergency ultimate of the deck is that with 2 or 3 Trail of Crumbs, you can be going through your deck very quickly, and the end game is to loop Murderous Rider, to use it on something, play it, sacrifice it to the bottom, sacrifice a food, reveal it again, and keep going and looping those until they have no planeswalkers, no creatures, they have no artifacts because those would become elk, etc.
And this is the other thing about this card. When you get to the late game, you think, oh, losing 2 life. Well, no, you're on like 100 billion life anyway. So this is a deck that is full of all of these intricately locking pieces, these mechanisms, and it's super creative and super sweet. So I mean, I know that you and a couple of your friends have been working on this list. Not all of them came to the tournament with it, but do you want to tell us a little bit about the brewing process?
Yes, absolutely. So it seemed like about a week ago, other people online on the Arena Ladder or on Magic Online have been coming to similar conclusions. John Smith on Magic Online, I believe Crokies is a notable streamer who has
out of Glasgow.
something similar. And I think people are recognizing how good Trail of Crumbs is.
Yeah.
And this was just using a team of, I got to lean on several Pro Tour winners and et cetera, to be able to take what was, I have this idea for an engine and figure out, okay, these are the non-engine cards that are good in it. These are the different angles that we hadn't seen before. And develop it.
Look, I'm very excited to see how it goes. We've got to cover off the lands, of course, very quickly. You said you were sort of playing a bit loosey-goosey with the mana base here, but one card I want to ask about is Castle Lochthwain. If you already have this velocity, if you've already got Trail of Crumbs to burn through your library, is Castle Lochthwain a particularly useful engine piece here?
So one thing that's important is that this deck doesn't have 5-drop Nissa, doesn't have Hydroid Krasis. So frequently it's not spending all its mana on the last card it plays, like with Krasis. Lochthwain allows you, first, obviously, if you don't have Trail, to be able to do something when you've drawn a bunch of 1-drops. You can empty your hand by turn 4 as opposed to ramp decks are just getting started really playing spells. And additionally, Castle Lochthwain works well with a card out of the sideboard, Rotting Regisaur.
Right,
which
fill that hand back up.
In particular, there are some decks where, like Reclamation, does not really care if what you're doing with Trail of Crumbs. It's not going to give you that many turns. But Rotting Regisaur is basically a sideboard juke, a sidestep against them, and Castle Lochthwain works really well with it.
Yeah, right. Okay. Well, all right. We can have a look at the final. So the land base, a little bit ambitious, but
there is no island. It doesn't tap for the things. I would happily play a Tendo Ice Bridge, but we don't have access.
No, bad luck. Oh well, that's the way it goes there. Look, best of luck this weekend. I hope it works out for you. This is a very sweet deck, and thanks for sharing it with us.
Thanks very much.
All right. Thanks very much. That's it for us from the floor right now. Back to the desk.